Victor, I'd like for you to talk to us about that, but we're going to talk primarily at the beginning about foster care where the child is transitioning into your home but is not currently living in your home. Thoughts on how parents can help the child make that transition and how they can help their other children and their family make that transition?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that we recommend is that when you start the visitation, that it be in the child's space, that you go to where the child's currently residing or the children, and that you really get to know their routines. You see kind of where they live, what's familiar to them, the kinds of things that they like to play with, the kinds of foods that they like to eat, and that you really begin to understand what the daily routine of that child is in the family that they're currently living or the situation that they're living in, and that you try to build some of those same things back into the family that you're in. So you start that transition by going to where the child is, and then you can go to like a kind of a mutual space that's not in your family, but maybe like in a park or maybe at a fast food restaurant or someplace. But that visitation becomes really important so the child becomes familiar with the new situation. So I think that's one of the key things is to know the child's routine.
And that's a great idea. So you start in their space, then you gradually move to a neutral space, park, fast food restaurant with a play area, whatever, and then move to your home. Would that be the general transition?
That's usually the transition, and it's the best plan if you can make it. And that you then increase visitation. So maybe the first visit is just a quick in and out, and the second visit is a couple hours, and then the third visit is longer period of time, and so you kind of extend it because you don't want this transition to be another trauma to the child. You want it to be thoughtful, planful from the child's perspective, not from the adults. What happens often is adults get so excited about this placement happening that they want to accelerate it. And it may be good for them, but it may not be in the best interest of the child. So you have to be very thoughtful about that process and not let your excitement and your feelings overwhelm good planning.
Stephanie, anything to add to tips for when transitioning in foster care where the child is not living in your home?
I think Victor hit on the major points. I think that you can talk to the foster parents to get a sense of how the child has been doing in their home.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing I would add is that try to get as much information as possible. One of the things that I really appreciated Stephanie's perspective is we want to make it realistic but not fatalistic when you're getting information. And so one of the things you have to realize is some information that you want may not be available. It may not be known. But what information is available, you should try to get because that helps you prepare, at least cognitively, thinking about what has been this child's experience, what kind of issues might I encounter. And so get the written material and keep a copy for yourself so that you at least have what is known at the time that your placement about the child's history.
Yeah, and what we encourage people is to get the full copy of the record, not the summary.
Yes, absolutely.
Get the copy. Spend some time. Pay the. They often sometimes they ask that you pay for the copy cost. It's worth it, or just go there, sit down, and spend time reading the entire file. So that's another great suggestion. Now, in international adoption, often the ideal scenario you've just talked about is not a possibility. So let's talk about an international adoption. What can we do that could mimic this, or is that even possible in most countries? And Victor, I'm going to turn to you for this one.
Yeah. So one of the things I encourage families to not do is don't hire an escort. Go to the country where the child is located. Even if both parents, if you're a two-parent family, can't go, one parent should go because you want to, as much as possible, replicate that transition process. If you hire somebody to just bring the child over, you never know their context of where they've been. And again, I would follow as much as possible it's going to be different in every country, but go to where the child's currently residing, spend some time in that location, figure out what foods they eat, what music they hear, what are the sights and sounds, and really don't just take the child if you can avoid it. Now, sometimes you can't. I mean, this is, I'm giving you like the Cadillac version of what you can do, but you may end up with a little, bicycle and not a car at all. But I think it is important to understand their context as you transition them to your family.
Yeah, you can try to the extent possible, replicate, but you also do have to be flexible because the reality is the country and the people on the ground there are going to be in charge, but you can speak up and you can do your best to try to set. All right, now we've got the child transitioned. The child has now arrived in our home. How can we set realistic expectations and routines with these newly adopted children? And I guess maybe that begs the question of, is it important, and if so, why is it important to set up routines for a newly adopted child?
Well,
I'm sorry, I should be directing that, Stephanie. I apologize. Stephanie,
I'll just say a little bit.
To you.
I'll just say a little bit, and I'm sure Victor can add more. But our third co-author, Gloria, always talks about the importance of absolutely setting routines. The child has been through so much, possibly moving from foster home to foster home. And now being adopted, that routine helps provide stability in their life and helps them have some expectations as to what family life is like in their new home. It's probably not the best idea to invite grandma and grandpa and Uncle Bill and Aunt Sally and, the 10 cousins over like the first week when the child comes into your home. That can be completely overwhelming. People talk about a honeymoon period where children are at their best behavior when they first come into the home. They perhaps don't want to be seen as a troublemaker that is going to be sent away again, have to go to another home, or the adoption will be canceled or something, whatever their thought process is. And then very often things, as they become more comfortable, actually some of the behavioral issues come into play. But that routine goes far in helping smooth things out in the beginning. And I've heard people suggest that it's important to prepare the siblings, their new siblings, if you have children by birth already in the home or other adopted children, prepare them for the child coming home and actually maybe have them correspond with the child before they come home to show how welcome they will be and how their new siblings are looking forward to their arrival and develop that relationship. So anything that can be done to make those first few months smoother and easier for the child are very important.
What we sometimes hear, Victor, what we sometimes hear from people is that, I'm just not a routine-oriented person. I'm just the spontaneous type. I find routines to be a straitjacket. What would you tell the parents who, and I get that, what would you tell to the adoptive parents who are the more spontaneous type, who feel like they would be chafing at the restrictions of routines? Victor?
Well, I would say welcome to parenthood. Parenthood and child and raising children, it can be chaotic, but it has to be chaotic within a structure. And they may chafe at it, but this is not about them. This is about what children do better at. And children do better with predictability and transparency. And so I'm a big proponent of putting up what are the rules, what's the routine, using a token economy where you give them stars for doing what you want them to do in the morning. And it could be very mundane things like get out of bed on time, brush your teeth, anything that a parent expects should be very explicit and clear and written in a way that children can see it and children begin to understand what's the routine in the family.
When you say routine, when you say make it explicit, give us some. If you've got a 5-year-old who is pre-literate, give us, or a child adopted from abroad who doesn't speak our language. How can you make your routines and expectations?
Great question. Pictures. Kids, you don't need to use language. You can just use a picture of somebody getting out of bed, of somebody brushing their teeth, of somebody combing their hair, somebody getting into the shower. So I think even pre-literate children respond to pictures and know that this is the way it's going to be every day, that this is the house I'm in, these are the way I'm supposed to behave in this house. Now, that can be negotiated later, but I think at the beginning it wants to be pretty consistent and clear because you want to have a successful transition as children kind of know what you expect. Many parents will take off initially, but then they have to go to work. And so that's an anxiety-producing time for children. What am I going to do when you go to work? Who's going to take care of me? Where do I go? And so, taking kids to the people who are going to care for them if you're hiring somebody to care for them. If they're going to a school and it's a new school, before they actually get there, taking them to the school. So I think there's lots of things that you can do that are not verbal, but you have to really prepare for adopting older children. And older children need structure and routine.
And I always believe that even the parents who are the spontaneous ones who are convinced that they would really struggle with setting up a routine, adopting an older child is a stressful situation for them as well. And I find that they also thrive with a routine. And it doesn't have to be forever. You can revert some to a little more loosey-goosey once you've set it up.
Absolutely.
We have a question from